It started subtly, a sound you'd dismiss a dozen times before letting it snag your attention. I was in the kitchen, making coffee, when I first heard it, a low mumble from the other side of the house, coming from the spare bedroom. My first thought was the TV. Maybe I'd left it on in there. The volume turned down to a whisper. I dried my hands on a dish towel and walked down the hallway, the old floorboards groaning under my weight. The sound was so faint, like a distant radio playing in another car. But as I got closer to the bedroom door, I realized it wasn't a TV. It was a voice, a human voice. I live alone. That was the first jolt of cold, hard reality that hit me. There was no one else here. The house was locked. The alarm was set. I'd been living in this quiet Indiana town for 3 years, and the most exciting thing that ever happened was a raccoon getting into the garbage cans. I stood outside the closed bedroom door, pressing my ear against the cool wood. The mumbling continued, indistinct and rhythmic. I couldn't make out any words, just the rise and fall of a cadence. It sounded practiced, like someone learning lines for a play, going over them again and again until they sank into muscle memory. My heart was starting to thud against my ribs. I thought about calling the police. What would I say? I think there's a very quiet, very polite burglar in my spare room, and they're rehearsing something. It sounded ridiculous, even in my own head. I backed away from the door, my mind racing through rational explanations. A neighbor's television, the sound carrying in a weird way through the walls. A crossed signal on a baby monitor I didn't own. A prank. None of it felt right. The sound was too close, too contained within my own house. I tried to ignore it. I went back to the kitchen, drank my coffee, and turned on some music, loud enough to drown out the world. For the rest of the day, it worked. I kept myself busy, did some work from home, and by the time evening rolled around, I had almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. That night, I went to bed, locking my own bedroom door for the first time since I moved in. Sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the old house was magnified. Every rustle of leaves outside the window sounded like footsteps. But the house remained silent. I finally drifted off, telling myself it was all just stress. The next day, it was back. This time it was clearer. I was in the living room reading a book. When the sound started again, it was still coming from the spare bedroom. I muted the TV and listened. The mumbling had progressed. Now, I could hear fragments of words, still low and hesitant, but discernible. And that's when the first real wave of terror washed over me. The voice. It was my voice, or a clumsy attempt at it. The pitch was right, the general tone was there, but it was stilted, like a bad actor trying to do an impression. It was like listening to a recording of myself, but a version that was just off. It was saying simple things. But hearing them spoken in this warped imitation of my own voice, coming from behind a closed door in my empty house, was the most unnerving thing I'd ever experienced. The voice would say a line, pause, and then repeat it, slightly different this time, a little smoother, a little more natural. It was correcting itself. It was learning. I couldn't just stand there. I had to know what was happening. I crept down the hall again, my bare feet silent on the floorboards. I stood at the door, my hand hovering over the knob. What was I going to find on the other side? My rational mind screamed that this was impossible, that I was having some kind of breakdown, but my ears weren't lying. The voice was real. It said another sentence. I need to pick up milk from the store. It sounded closer to me now, closer to perfect. I grabbed the doorknob. It was cold, and my palm was sweating. I took a deep breath, braced myself, and turned it. The latch clicked loudly in the quiet hallway. The voice inside stopped instantly. The silence that followed was somehow more terrifying than the sound had been. I pushed the door open. The room was exactly as I'd left it. The bed was neatly made, a layer of dust on the nightstand. The window was closed and locked. The closet was shut. There was no one there. Absolutely no one. I checked under the bed, in the closet, behind the curtains. Nothing. The room was empty, still, and silent. I felt like I was losing my mind. I slammed the door shut and ran back to the living room, grabbing my phone. I scrolled through my contacts, my thumb hovering over my sister's name, then the police. But again, what could I say? I had no proof, just a sound that vanished the second I tried to confront it. I spent the rest of the day in a state of high alert, jumping at every noise. The house felt alien to me now, a place of hidden threats. The next few days were a tense, quiet hell. The voice didn't come back. The silence was a constant strain on my nerves. I started to doubt myself again. Had I hallucinated the whole thing? Was I just sleep-deprived and paranoid? I started sleeping with the lights on. I barely ate. I felt like a ghost in my own home, waiting for something to happen. Then, a week later, it started again. And it was worse. Much worse. I was in my home office, trying to concentrate on a spreadsheet, when I heard it. Not from the spare room this time. It was coming from my own bedroom, right next door. It was talking about my day. That meeting was so frustrating. I can't believe Mark took credit for my idea. I had thought that exact thing not 2 hours earlier, fuming silently in my office chair. Hearing my private, internal monologue spoken aloud in my own voice from the next room was a violation on a level I can't even describe. It was like my mind was being read, my thoughts stolen and then rehearsed. The voice was better now, too. Much better. The careful, stilted quality was almost gone. It sounded natural. It sounded like me. It talked about my childhood dog, Buster. It mentioned the stupid argument I had with my best friend last month. It was taking my memories, my feelings, my entire identity, and practicing them, polishing them. It knew everything. It knew the rhythm of my speech, the specific way I sigh when I'm tired, the little chuckle I do when I'm nervous. It was perfecting its impression, but this was no simple mimicry. This was an absorption. It was learning to be me. I sat there for what felt like hours, listening to myself talk about things I'd never say out loud, secrets I barely acknowledged to myself. The voice recounted the time I fell off my bike in 3rd grade and lied about how I got the scar on my knee. It talked about the first time I fell in love, and the first time my heart was broken. It was a highlight reel of my life, narrated by a thief. The hint of embarrassment when talking about the scar, the wistful sadness when mentioning that first love, and then, it got quiet. I held my breath, straining to hear. Had it stopped? Was it over? The silence stretched on, thick and heavy. I had to see, I had to know. I tiptoed out of the office and down the short hallway to my bedroom door. I placed my ear against it, but there was nothing, just pure, absolute silence. My heart hammered against my chest like a trapped bird. And then another. It was the sound of the lock on the inside of the door being turned. My blood ran cold. I hadn't locked it. I never locked it from the inside, when I wasn't in there. Then, I heard it. One final sentence, whispered from the other side of the door. The delivery was flawless. The tone, the inflection, the slight hesitation before the last word, it was perfect. It was me. It was a thought I had just had, a split second before. It said, "I wonder who's out there," and then, the doorknob began to turn.